That's a really excellent point. It's the incredible discrepancy we have between much of like the fair trade movement, which I feel is a lot of it is upper middle class luxury, the ability to assuage our own personal guilt and things like that. But that's not why I would promote it, because I think it's important to take positions about these things. In terms of disenfranchised communities, underprivileged communities, you know, the disparity, which I was highlighting in that picture of starving kids with these completely overweight kids. I mean, one of the problems that we have in this country is that processed food is incredibly cheap to buy. And the reason that, see, all processed food came out of war. The Americans in World War II, I mean, margarine came from Napoleon. They needed butter for these troops. So we tend to forget that processed food is actually a direct result of war, because they needed to feed these armies as they were moving. And so in World War II, they learned how to do this stuff to a degree scientifically that they'd never achieved before. And they could keep long life, shelf life. And they realized, you know, because this military-industrial complex, the same people that are supplying that during wartime are the people that are selling, you know, the food during peacetime. They realize that this is a great way. We don't have to worry about perishables, because nothing will perish. They lose a lot of money,
except for
because
us.
when you take, you know, it's amazing how many. The reason it's so expensive at Whole Foods is because they lose a lot of that food. And this is the problem, and farmers know this. So one of the really important movements is urban homesteading, where people are beginning to put gardens on their rooftops. African American communities in Detroit are beginning to do this, and it's a really interesting movement where they're bringing fresh food to disenfranchised communities, and some of the schools are doing it. This is really important. So I think Louisville, it would be really useful to bring some of these people in to show them how to do it. We can grow our own food, and it actually is realistic. People can have gardens. In World War II, they had what were called victory gardens, where unlike these recent wars where they encourage you to go out and spend, they used to encourage you actually to save and recycle. World War II was a great era of recycling. People were recycling everything. And, you know, if you go to third world countries, people wear sandals made out of used tires, because it's a really good heel. A sole for the shoe, and so these are the things where we need to get creative in our communities, and not, you know, so many of our communities in the inner cities, they can go and get. It's easier to get liquor than it is to get food, and it's much easier to get. You can't get vegetables in a lot of these inner city stores. It's all processed food. They get corn out of the can. And children love to do it. They love to plant. You can get the kids involved in it. They get connected to the earth. You know, you mentioned earlier, we're called Benu Adam, you know, in the Jewish and the Muslim tradition. And Adam is Adama, you know, or Udma in Arabic is the topsoil. And in our tradition, the reason he was called Adam, and really it's the first Adam had the male, female, and then it splits into the two of Adam and Eve. So the first Adam, the first creation was the human being, you know, which was, but the reason it's called topsoil is because we're told that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that God took white soil, black soil, brown soil, all the different colors of the topsoil in the world, and put them into Adam so that all these colors would be reflected in his creation from all the soils of the earth.
We have the same story. We probably borrowed from you.
Well, you know, look, the Prophet Muhammad, you know, people say that Islam, a lot of it's just from Judaism, but the Prophet Muhammad, the Quran says, you didn't make this stuff up. You're not an innovator from the message. You're bringing the same message. So much of it is in Jewish tradition. We know that, and the Jewish tradition is part of our tradition. Mm-hmm. So, and there are many. I mean, all my tafsirs are filled with midrash and you know, the Gomorrah story. It's all in the Islamic tradition. They never shied away from that. I mean, we had rabbis that became Muslim. There was interactions between rabbis and Muslim scholars, and so these are all. This is wisdom. It's just hikmah, you know, hukmat.
Hukmah.
Yeah. So this belongs to everybody. You know, we have to honor our small farmers because, I'm fortunate to be in Northern California where the slow food movement started, that we have local farmers markets that we can go to on a regular basis. So we get all our food from local growers. I would much rather support them than support, even though, Whole Foods has some pretty enlightened leadership there, but I would still rather support the local growers as much as possible. And I think that's something really important. So, and people, you were talking earlier downstairs just about, this loopy feeling about being connected to the land, but the truth is farmers suffer immensely. The highest suicide rates in India are from the small farmers. They get them into these usurious debts. And we had, people remember the 80s crises, the highest rates of suicide were among small farmers. We're losing our small farmers. And agribusiness is taking over. And this is what I'm talking about, the rulers of darkness of this world. A lot of these people, and there's good people in that. I'm not in any way Manichaean. I don't, there's good CEOs, there's decent people working, but these are soul-destroying institutions that we've set up. And so I'm not in any way, I'm not a revolutionary in that I don't believe in, if we just can kill the evil ruler, suddenly everything's gonna, be fine. It's not like that. And there's good people in Washington, D.C., there's good people in government, there's really amazing police. And then there's people that abuse these powers, and some of them, there are really dark demonic people that we have termed psychopaths, and about 1 out of 22 Americans is considered to be psychopathic, and there are functional psychopathic people, often in CEO positions, that don't have moral compassion. This is social science in our culture. I would recommend, there's several books on this. One of them is The Sociopath Next Door. A lot of people think sociopath, the serial killer. No, there are sociopaths that are surgeons, there are sociopaths that are CEOs, and they really don't think like other people. They just don't feel remorse about harming others or harming the earth or whatever. So in terms of a practice, I wouldn't even want to advise you on that. I think people, we're living in an age that enables us to experiment with religions. This is in some ways unprecedented. In other ways, we've always had eclecticism and interaction of traditions. Muslims and Jews lived together for centuries in places like Morocco and Sarajevo. And so there's always been these, and we know that different traditions adopted methods. St. Francis was influenced by the Sufis. When he got back, he adopted some of those practices. And certainly, the Muslims of India found the Hindus doing certain things that they thought were interesting. So you'll find a type of chakra understanding in certain Indian Sufi tariqas and things like this. So there's always been that kind of eclecticism. But I come out of a spiritual tradition that really says that it's good to take a serious tradition and to practice it. And for me personally, there are certain things that I have to do every day. I think the only thing that I really incorporate outside of my own tradition is I've been practicing Qigong for some time now and derived a lot of benefit from it just physically because I was having a lot of energy problems. But I think we need to have time with ourselves alone where we can just disengage and turn off all these things. I have a friend of mine, he's an imam in Washington, D.C., who has a box in the front of his house, and when everybody comes in, they have to put the cell phones in the box, and they're not allowed to use any cell phones inside the house. And he's a Sudanese man, and I thought that was really an excellent practice. I think a lot of us need to disengage from the madness of these constantly being, texting and getting called. We don't have to answer the phone every time it rings. You really don't.